I'm Alejandro with Kleinn Automotive Accessories, and today we are installing our Hog Kit 1 on a Harley-Davidson Road Glide. This is primarily a bench build. Let's get to it. This will fit on any Harley-Davidson with the following characteristics. So we have a bell housing that's on the side of our cylinder heads here, and then we need to make sure that it has a very specific configuration. I'm going to disassemble this so we can talk about the rest of the requirements to make sure that this kit will fit on your motorcycle. To remove this bell housing, I'm just going to use a 1/2-inch socket, and we're going to go ahead and take this off. We want to save these because this is how our kit is going to be reinstalled in this same position when we go to fully install it. This bell housing has a support bracket that goes right along the middle. That's the defining feature that you need for our kit to be able to work. It also has attachment points here and here. Those are also going to be important because we attach the bell housing to our bracket using this upper bolt hole once this is disassembled. Other bell housings, they're going to have a little tab right here that will attach to the motorcycle. That is not going to work with our kit. Our objective is to remove the bell housing, but looks like some aftermarket light here, and then we have our original connectors for the horn that we need to pull off. So let's go ahead and take care of that before we remove our bell housing from the actual mounting plate. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all this electrical tape and see if there's a connector under there that I can disconnect. You could tell this area sees a lot of heat because this tape is really brittle. Okay, now that our aftermarket wiring here for a light is done, I'm just going to go ahead and remove these connectors, and you just pull them off. Now that I got my wires disconnected, I'm just going to use a pry tool, and I'm going to bend that piece of metal up just a little bit so we can disconnect our wire. Now our bell housing is removed. Next thing is to remove these two bolts here. I'm going to go ahead and use a 3/8 socket to take this mounting bracket off. Now that the mounting plate is removed, we're going to take this to the bench and we'll remove the barrel nuts and the horn. I'm going to go ahead and remove the clip-on barrel nuts, and then I'll undo this nut so that we can remove our horn assembly from this housing. Now the next step is to elongate this hole a little bit because we're going to need a little bit of clearance in order to mount this bell housing onto our bracket. To do that, I'm going to just take a ruler. I'm actually going to use the metric side, but you can use the imperial equivalent, and I'm going to mark 17 to 18 millimeters down, which is about right there. Now I'm going to make some tangent lines that'll connect this hole to make it a little bit oblong. I'm going to use a rotary tool, and I'm just going to clear out that material, and then I will go ahead and touch it up with a little bit of enamel to prevent any damage from exposed metal. I put our bell housing in some soft jaws on our vise. Now I'm going to use an end mill bit attached to my rotary tool to kind of bore out this hole, elongate it a little bit, so that when this goes to be installed on our bracket, there won't be any fitment issues. I think that looks pretty good. We'll go with that, and if we need to make any adjustments to this hole, we'll go ahead and do that once we're installing it. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove these trumpets from the base. They're just going to twist off. We're going to do this because at the time of the installation of the fully assembled bracket, we don't want to have any problems with fitment. Now I can go ahead and start attaching our main bracket assembly together. The hardware in this kit is pretty basic. We're going to start with a bolt, a flat washer, and then here we're going to put it through our little bracket. Then we're going to get one of our rubber insulators. We're putting in our horn base, and we're sandwiching that with another rubber insulator. There's a little tab right there that's going to fit in the tab slot on our bracket. I'm going to go ahead and set up the other bolts before I put this onto our main bracket. Now that we got our base in place and we have our little bracket installed with the tab there, I'm going to go ahead and put my flat washers. Then we're going to put our split lock washers, and then we have our acorn nuts that are going to finish this off. Before I proceed any further, I'm going to go ahead and fully tighten these. We're going to use a 7/16 open-ended wrench and the socket that matches. We're good with this. Let's set it aside for now, and we can start working with the air compressor. I'm ready to install the air compressor onto the main bracket. We are going to be using a square bolt for the back of the compressor. We're going to just slide it in there after we lower our protective cover, We'll put it back in. It kind of holds it into place. Now we're gonna take our bell housing. That's that modification we did. What we wanna do is we wanna slide our compressor right into it. You see how we kind of needed to make that clearance, otherwise this wouldn't have sat very well when it's installed on the bracket. Now I can just take this onto the main bracket. We're going to put it into position, and for right now I'm going to use a flat washer, my lock washer, and the acorn nut, and we're just going to put this here loosely to hold the compressor in place. This gives us a little bit of room to kind of pivot, and we got to work on this bottom section here. This is probably the most complicated part of the whole installation. We're going to use our U-channel and our clamp, and we are actually going to line it up edge to edge. If it needs to be cut a little bit, go ahead and cut it. It's not a big deal. Now, this is our mounting hole, so we are going to put our clamp over the bottom of our compressor. We need to make sure that our clamp is sitting high and that our rubber U-channel is aligned in the back with this black edge, that transition between the black and the chrome. So once that's there, I can go ahead and pivot the whole thing into position, and you can see my hole lines up, and then you can also see that this bracket, this little bend here, is resting on that U-channel. That is really important. That's what we need to have. So with this kind of in position, now I can go ahead and start attaching the hardware. I'm going to flip this over. Now I'm going to take the remaining hardware. It's going to be a bolt with a flat washer. It's going to go through that top portion of that clamp, that top hole. And now we have a aluminum bushing that we're going to put as an in-between. You get that lined up. Now that that's in position, I'm going to go ahead and force this bolt through the hole, and we should be good here. I've got to make sure my rubber U-channel is not getting in the way. Okay, I got it locked into position. Now let's fit the whole thing through the back of the mounting bracket. Now that it's there, I'm just double checking that everything's making positive contact. Then I could go ahead and go with my split lock washer and our last acorn nut. I'm going to tighten this one down first because that's going to clamp the compressor into position. Then I'll go ahead and align my bell housing properly, and then I'll fully tighten that bolt. All right, that's good there. Now let's change out my socket. Before I final tighten it, we're just gonna make sure my alignment is nice and straight. I'm actually gonna loosen it and try to position this outside just a little bit more. Okay, that position is better for me. Okay, now we have this installed. We are ready to move over to the motorcycle. So we're back at the motorcycle. This is where we took off the original horn. This hole is gonna line up just about right there. I can set this here. For now, I wanna take a look at the visual of this motorcycle, and I wanna see whether we want this longer trumpet on the bottom or the top. There's plenty of space here. We're gonna go with the top. That way we're not interfering with any of these extended shift pegs. Now I'm gonna go ahead and reuse that hardware we retained. I'm actually also going to reuse that little clamp we had removed for the wiring. We'll just try to incorporate that. Maybe it won't work, maybe it will. Let's sit it in there and see. Okay, so that didn't originally mount there, so that's not gonna work. That's okay. We'll just leave it alone for now, and we'll just go with zip ties. I'm putting in this bolt exactly how we took it off in the past. I'm gonna let that hang a little bit, and now I'm going to install the trumpets. We're just snugging those up. They don't need to be crazy tight. Okay, now that that's there, we will take a look at the alignment. That looks about level to me. I'm gonna go ahead and start tightening it up. And now we have our horn installed, we can switch over to the wiring. Now this kit comes with a nice wire harness that we're going to use. It will use some of the factory wires and will tap into the battery. So I have already removed the seat. Now we need to get access to the battery, which is actually underneath this shroud and this ECM. So let's go ahead and take care of that. I'm just gonna undo these two bolts. It looks like that's what holds the ECM and that shroud. Now it looks like I'm also going to have to remove this connector. It looks like I'm just gonna press this tab down and see if that comes undone. Now I'm just gonna pry this connector off because it looks like it's going to interfere with removing this shroud. All right, there we go. Let's finish removing those bolts and then we'll see what we have underneath.
So the battery is under here. I see the terminals. Now that I've undone this, I see that there's some access ports right there and right here, though this one is covered. I'm going to try to pull off this connector and see if I get a little bit better access. All right, so if you can look, now remember this is a 2015 Road Glide. You see this bent tab here. That's what was causing the hang up for this bracket to actually be removed. So at this angle, you can see that little metal tab that I was referring to earlier. It kind of slots right inside of this rectangular channel. That's what was hanging up when I was trying to lift up this plastic shroud. This is our wiring harness. It actually comes pre-wired to just work with everything. So we have this main wire with the fuse. I'm gonna take this off real quick. This is gonna go to our positive terminal on the battery. Then we have a thick gauge black wire that's going to be going to our negative. We have a purple wire. This is going to be the horn signal wire that actually goes to the positive wire where we disconnected in the horn at the very beginning of this video. And then we have these two, which are going to be going to our compressor, which will power our air horns. To get started, I'm going to hook up the positive and the negative wires. We have to keep in mind that this has to stay under the seat. So we have a lot of room here to maneuver our wiring. I need to make sure that when everything's connected, that I have the ability to close off that shroud and have a spot for this relay to kind of sit. There's a lot of empty space right over here. I think that's what I'm going to go for the relay, something along these lines here. Now it's important to note that this relay, it actually doesn't come with a fuse. The fuse is included with your kit. We just leave it out so that once it's wired up, you're not dealing with any live power. This is the negative. Let's focus on that one first. So this is a 10mm socket. It fits perfectly right over that negative terminal. I'm just giving myself a little bit of extension here so I have room to work. So this is going to be a really easy connection. I'm just going to crimp my wire with the ring terminal and then I will go ahead and install it on here. I'm going to put this back in place just for now. Just keep it a little loose. We'll loosen up the positive terminal. Be careful, this is live, so you don't want to touch any part of the motorcycle frame because you don't want to create an accidental short. I just used the 10 gauge wire cutter. I stripped it down a little bit and I twisted the wire so that it gives it a little bit of integrity and better electrical continuity. Now that's our negative terminal. Let's go ahead and install that. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my red wire. I'm going to strip it here, put a crimp connector, and then we'll attach it to the positive terminal. You recall I took off the split wire loom. I'm going to reinstall it just so that the wire is protected, and then I'll go in and just make sure it's secured. So I got my main wires connected. I'm gonna install the fuse now, and then I'm gonna cover up the battery again just to make sure everything's gonna fit. And once that's closed up, I don't wanna have to open it again. Okay, it all fits, it's tucked up, and I have access to the remaining wires. Let's go ahead and seal this up, and we will continue with our wiring. Now there's a nice channel of wires that goes through a hole in the frame. It actually follows the OEM wiring. I'm gonna go ahead and stick with that and keep up that routing. So I'm gonna use my purple wire first. We're just gonna route it down through this hole. So now this purple wire is actually going to connect to our positive horn wire from the OEM. I am just going to cut off that connector and then we'll splice it. And I'll tape everything up so it looks nice and we can get our routing as far away from the cylinder head as possible. All right, I have this crimp with the blue terminal. This is a fairly thick wire, and now I give it a little tug, make sure that's good. So I have a little too much. Let's peel back our loom to expose the wire we need, and then we'll trim it a little short. So I'm gonna trim it right there. That should give me enough length to keep the wires nice and tight. There's a little bundle of wires underneath the gas tank. We'll keep it along those lines. Now this wire is a little bit thinner than what our OEM wire was. So I'm gonna strip this wire a little long and then I'm gonna double it over. Now I'm just going to get my crimpers in position before I actually feed the wire. Sometimes that's just a little bit easier way to do it. All right, I'm giving a little tug. I can go ahead and recover this wire with our split loom, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna tape this all up with electrical tape so that the negative wire from our OEM system is not going to be dangling, getting in the way, or potentially getting damaged. I'm just going to use a little bit more tape and I'm going to cover that connector. That way if there's any water splashing up on it, it doesn't actually corrode. Now this wire will be tucked up nice and tight along with the remaining part of our aftermarket wiring. I'll go in with some zip ties and secure those, but first let's make our final connections. These red and black wires are actually going to be going to the compressor that's right behind the bell housing. I think that's the routing we're going to go with. Now for wiring up this compressor, it is important that there is a negative and a positive terminal. So you have to match up the color of your wires with the negative and the positive. For my situation, the negative is here closer towards the engine of the vehicle, and the positive is actually on this side. Positive here, negative back there. Okay, those wires are connected. Now the last thing I'm going to do is run my air tubing from the compressor to the horns. Now let's use our included zip ties and we'll tighten up all this electrical. Okay, I feel good about this. Now let's reinstall the seat and we can test out the system. And we're good to go.